I'm going live now. Great. Welcome everyone to our ninth guest artist talk this summer. Um, and today we are extremely lucky to have the esteemed Yosvany Terry with us. Um, Yosvany was born in Cuba and studied classical music in Cuba, from what I understand, and then came over to New York and picked up jazz and is now the jazz professor at Harvard University, but also plays contemporary classical music with his trio. And I'm pretty sure there's not anything this guy does not do. Um, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Yosvany, who's going to be talking a little bit about improvisation and his influences today. So thanks so much for being here, Yosvany.
Well, thanks a lot to you, Peter, and Shoshana, and everybody else that is part of the zFestival. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and also to learn from some of you from previous um, editions of the festival. I had the privilege to see some of the edition through Peter. He was generous enough to let me see some of the festivals edition before, and it's been wonderful. So I was really inspired to be part of the festival. So thank you for being, for the invitation, and thanks to you guys also for coming and tuning in today. Um, it will make something I wanted to say is like, I want to make it really natural and organic. So if you feel that there's a question that you have, whether it's a burning question or not, just don't wait for the burning one. Just ask questions, and we'll create an organic conversation. So that's what I would love to do. I wanted to talk a little bit about giving you some context and background of my musical upbringing from the family. I'm coming from a musical family. My father is a musician. My two other brothers are musicians too. And music was in the family since I was born, or before I was born, I would say. On both sides of the family, uh, we had like big influence of Afro-Cuban musical traditions. From my father's side, it's more within the Yoruba and Congolese musical traditions that came from West Africa, and specifically from the Yoruba Kingdom in Nigeria, and then from the Congo. And then from my mother's side, the musical traditions come from Haiti. So it could be traced back all the way to the Dahomey Kingdom in what is nowadays Benin. But also my great grandfather from my mother's side was from Spain, from Canary Island too. So growing up, music was in the family. Even before I was able to speak, I was going to a lot of ceremonies, religious ceremonies, where not only were a vehicle for the community to keep, dance, theater, music, uh, their gastronomy or culinary things, but also finding a way to help and commute to help, and also be in contact with the entire community event. But it was at the same time something that I was not able to speak with my friends, because there was so many things happening there, that how can you break that to a friend at school when you're 5 years old, when you're like 3 years old. So that was something very impactful, to have this proximity to music and to music making at that age. I would remind, I would recall perhaps when I was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, trying to get a cowbell and see if I could, play with the musicians, and of course, you can do it for a little bit, then you get this look that means like you're off rhythm, so you have to wait a little bit to be older in order to hold this. But this was really important. It was an impact. It was my father also, who was a violin player, and also shaker player, which is a gourd that it's has a lot of beats in the outside. And it comes the tradition that he plays. It came all the way from Nigeria, and seeing him practicing and all practicing the violin at home, and he was a composer too. and teaching us discipline. So, for me, serious music, started at the age of 5 years old, when I officially started taking private lessons at home. And then from then, though I started in the violin, I went to classical music conservatories for saxophone. So I just like did all my saxophone studies to become a concert soloist. And it was also during the time that I was at school that I discovered, I would say, jazz and improvisation. It's one of the memories that is like very vivid with me and my brother bringing back home a Chick Corea tape, and them, as you've been studying music, you understand everything that's happening until that moment comes in that you just don't know where everybody went at that point. And that became to me an obsession, to the point that I wanted to discover, how do you do that? How What type of preparation do you need to have in order to become an improviser? But also at the same time, understanding improvisation as an in the moment composition, but also as someone that is really highly prepared musically to be able to comment, to interplay with musicians on stage, and then to make a statement while you're creating, uh, uh, while you're creating and performing with other people. So I think this was like the biggest drive that also pushed me to study composition seriously, uh, um, and then started paying attention to the process of composition, and composition as an art form, and not just as something that you can do to imitate, uh, or trying to repeat certain sounds. So I would say, like, then I went to once I moved to New York, I had the opportunity to study with the composer Leo Edwards, who was teaching at Manes, and then with them, we just like started developing so many different approach to compositions. Uh, I am a jazz musician too. I'm a composer, but I'm, as Peter said, is someone that believe in music in broader terms. So music is just everything. Yes, there are styles, there are languages, there are vocabularies that that in a way shape what we call styles or genres. But to me, the most important part is just like to understand music as a complete thing. It's not just I am this or I am the other. It's just like, no, I love music, and I love music and say that I love everything that happens. So if you feel that there is a question that you want to do, just go ahead and ask them. Uh, I would say that I really started to use more improvisation as a vehicle for self-expression too, after 15 years old. Yeah, when I started, as I was saying, just to try to figure it out how to do that. What is in there? What's the process? How can you peel it and find what was behind there? What were these people uh, researching on their own? What were they eating? How come someone arrived to think in that way? Um, and this is the same thing that the same idea that is behind me today. Whenever I'm going to create a new project, it's like, okay, how what are the the structure behind them, if there is any, or how can we relate with other musicians, and how can we create something that exists, but something that at the same time never heard before, no one heard before. So I wanted to play you a little bit to give you more context of of some of the sounds that inform my music from a short documentary that is called A Return to Havana. So in this case, what I wanted to show you is like some of the musical traditions that I was hearing when I was little, and those drums, big drums that came all the way from the kingdom of Dahomey, and how all of this relate with dance, theaters, and things like that. So, if you are ready, I can take you into a journey for that. So let me get ready here. Okay, good. And we'll tell you this what you're going to see is a trip that I made to Cuba, perhaps like a couple of years ago, perhaps like 3 or 4 years ago, in which I brought back my quintet, and then I took them to Matanzas. Matanzas is a province in Cuba, which is next to Havana, is east of Havana, and then specifically to a municipality named Jovellanos. And then in Jovellanos, we went to visit La Familia Baró. La Familia Baró, they have been keeping this musical tradition since it arrived, especially because one of the great grandfather came all the way from Dahomey as a slave, and then he bought his freedom. But not only that, then he wrote to the king of Dahomey in order to let him know that he was basically protecting the culture that he brought with him, and also had created this this, I would say, a folkloric group with his family in order to preserve those traditions. So this is a little bit of like interaction with me, some of the members of my quintet going into Matanzas. And I want you to see, more than anything, just to pay attention to the drums, the type of music that they play, the interaction with dance, and how, I mean, and imagine growing up and just being exposed to that and trying to just make sense of like, what is this that is before you? You know, how can you explain that? So this is it. Mm. Mi casa siempre fue como una embajada musical y mi padre como un embajador de la cultura. Desde pequeño crecer en mi casa era la oportunidad de conocer a muchos músicos, ir a cualquier presentación de mi padre con la Orquesta Maravilla de Florida, de la cual él fue fundador. Era para nosotros como ser parte de un concierto. Y ya desde chiquitico cogían mi padre una botella de agua plástica, esta le ponía frijoles y nos las daba, y nosotros pensábamos que estábamos tocando el chequeré en el escenario. No nos veíamos haciendo otra cosa. A medida que pasa el tiempo, como que se reafirma para mí el concepto del Caribe como el centro del universo. Yo veo a Cuba y veo a mi cultura como parte de un universo donde está el mundo completo. No lo veo como algo encerrado en límites de fronteras geográficas. Jovellanos es una tierra mágica, una tierra muy espiritual. Preserva mucho nuestras tradiciones, específicamente las que tienen que ver conmigo, con mi familia, con mis ancestros. Para mí venir acá es como un viaje a la semilla, un viaje a mis antepasados, un viaje también a casi mi memoria ancestral. Es algo que se siente más allá de escribirse específicamente con palabras. Decidí venir aquí a Jovellanos con parte de mi quinteto. Para ello ha sido como una experiencia transformadora. Se han encontrado con una historia que ellos mismos no sabían que existía. Se han encontrado también con un pasado que es presente y que es futuro al mismo tiempo. Se han encontrado como una comunidad a las cuales ellos pertenecen, incluso antes de venir acá. Y es la forma de mejor entender de dónde vengo, quién soy y de qué se trata mi música y el contenido de las cosas que estoy haciendo. Busco conocer mis antepasados y es con el fin de crear unos cimientos bastante profundos para volar bastante alto. Pienso que cada artista tiene que tratar de abrir las fronteras musicales de su contexto. Yo creo en el lenguaje musical, no creo en estilos, no creo en una forma específica de hacer y porque creo también que la música es una. Let's stop right there. But at least like it gives you some ideas and when so all of these sounds are complete are just like are always with you. And as a mature person, I still go back to the community, participate in all the ceremonies and things that happen. So as a composer, it's like, how do you make sense out of these sounds and information, and work with them in a way in which like you're not just creating a repository that already exists, but you're just like trying to come up with ideas that are pushing pushing the tradition, but pushing also the aesthetics, the contemporary aesthetics that we are musically working with. So this is an idea. I want to share with you show you another, a different type of tradition also that exists in the countryside, which we call punto cubano. And this one comes more from the Spanish influences that still prevail in Cuba. And tradition like that, of course, came all the way from Spain, from the Canary Island. And it's very competitive because you can find like two singers that they're challenging each other with what they're saying. And they're challenging each other about, first of all, it's like there's like a lot of involvement with improvisation because everything is improvised right now. So it's like, if we think about spoken word, if we think about rap, if we think about improvisation, these people came before, and this is a tradition that improvisation is at the center of it. Now there's like two types of punto. There's punto libre or free punto, which is what you're going to see now, and then punto fijo, which means steady, and is the one that was practiced more in the province where I come from Camagüey. So I want to play you some of punto so that you see what it sounds like, and then give you some insight of a composition inspired by punto fijo. So this is it. Second, if I was able to do this again, I think I would be. Oh. Yep. So this is it. Remember, you have any question, don't hesitate. As I said, this is punto fijo. So as you see, just by the instrumentation, the way that is organized, and you will see how singers start like challenging each other. The whole the whole accompaniment stop, and then they have to accompany the singer whatever they're taking the thing. So this is it. This is punto. We're one of the most important singers over there.
Cuando hablo de Justo Vega en toda su maestría, cuando hablo de Justo Vega en toda su maestría, hablo de la poesía que tanto al pueblo le llega. las comparte. El que en amor se reparte es por su altísima hechura, un sol para la cultura y una joya para el arte.
Check how the ensemble stops and then accommodates to adjust to accompany them.
Mi hermano, ¿qué es lo que yo puedo hacer? Dime tú que eres mi hermano, ¿qué es lo que yo puedo hacer para cumplir mi deber en este altísimo plano?
And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on.
¿Qué puedo?
And as you can imagine, it's becomes a controversy. We call it una controversia, which is like, you know, it's a challenge. They have to challenge each other, and they really have to be creative to come up with responses. So it's not just and it has to be musical, because if it's not really musical, then you don't qualify for it. So I want to play. Well, first of all, I want to say that, you know, I like to give you context of, you know, some of my sources of inspiration, because I mean, I believe in research. I believe in, you know, going into the countryside, into the field, and getting in there, and then, you know, research, bring back those knowledge, and then putting into my composition process. So this composition that I want to play for you now, it's called Punto Cubano de Domingo, which means punto is what we just, punto cubano is what we just heard. It's like a Sunday, Cuban Sunday punto cubano, something like that. The most important, the big differences in what you just heard from what I'm going to play is like in the punto cubano that I'm trying to, that I got, was inspired for, the clave, which is like goes like this. So you will hear that clave going from instrument to instrument, and then it's like the invisible musician that is constantly playing, but at the same time and it never stops, because in this case, even when you get into the challenge part of the singer, the clave keeps playing all the time, unlike what we just saw. So this is a composition that I wrote for a trio. Is Bohemian Trio, which is piano, cello, and saxophone. Let me see if I can get this for you guys. And I think I was hip. One sec. In fact, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna share with you the screen with the music, with the. As we see, this is the clave guajira that we were talking about. Now this is what we're gonna listen to. Punto Cubano de Domingo. you hear the clave all the way, always. I just it was we introduced improvisation through in the chamber music. It's right there. against my will, I have to just stop it. But it's just like I wanted to give you just an idea, and all of the music I will send it. I promise I'll share with Peter, so he will be able just to send it to you guys. I didn't want to stop it. Just believe me, I just didn't want to stop it. It was the saxophone solo, and then continues the composition. But we need to. I wanted to expose you to more about the stuff. As I said, all of this came just inspired by the punto that we saw before. That came like what more. Even though, as I said, punto came from the Canary Island, from that region of Spain, but it was also transformed a little bit and enriched with some of the influences that came from West Africa. Like, for instance, the clave that we heard. This clave, you can also trace it back to the first group that you saw when in the trip that to Jovellanos Matanzas, where you saw the big drums. So that clave, it didn't exist in Spain at all. So it's like, you can see how how in the countryside people would just gather together, get things and pop up, and then before you knew, or before you know, everybody's just like contributing their own culture to create something that then becomes a hallmark of the country. So that's a punto one. I also, if you have any question while we're here, before I go to somewhere else, some other examples, just feel free to ask. So Amanda, if you have questions, just let me know.
It looks like Dionisio has a question.
Yeah, I was actually researching about the clave rhythm a couple of months ago, and I found out that well, the clave rhythm, while it's iconic in like Afro-American music, it's also found in like the world of like Arabic North African music. So, given that Spain was under Arabic rule for a good while, wouldn't it be like natural to find the clave rhythm in Spanish music as well?
That's a great point. Yes. So we know that the Moors, as we say, the Moorish influence came to the Andalusia, which used to be called Al-Andalus, which they dominated them for like 700 years. And yes, but it's like, to understand that is to understand who are the Moors, besides having a unified religion. In this case is Muslims, but to understand them, yes, there were Morocco, but there was also Tunisia, but there were people as far as Mauritania. There are people as far as like countries that are considered sub-Saharan countries. And when you understand the trade, the trading routes of that North Africa, then you understand like, oh wow, there was so much more that arrived to El Andalus, which is Andalusia right now, that have all of the influence. So it's like understanding flamenco, the origins of flamenco. Yes, the origins of flamenco has contribution from all of the Moors. And when I say the Moors, again, I'm referring to this like really big geography. So Dionisio, yes, you're guessing what, right? Yeah, there were influences that came all the way from Africa to Spain then, but we didn't have the punto guajiro. As you go back to Spain and you listen to it in its original form, you don't hear that clave there at the time.
Okay, so the generalization is found in Spain, but this specific case is not.
Yes, because
Okay.
like similar forms of tradition you can find in Colombia, in Mexico, sometime in the rural part, also in Venezuela, in different parts of Spain, in Puerto Rico, in Cuba, and Dominican Republic. But they have different twists. They have different. I would say they are informed differently. They're informed with what arrived and with what was there that also contributed to the genres that we have today in those places. Is that Is that does that answer your questions?
Yeah, yeah, thanks.
Okay, okay. So moving on, since I wanted to I want to take you into a journey around the geographies that I've been exposed since I was born. So I wanted to show you show you a work that is have completely different information. And this one is a collaboration that I did. It's a project that I did that is called was called New Throne King, and it was informed by a lot of the tradition that came from the what we know as the Arara, but that came from the old kingdom of Dahomey. Those were the drums that you saw in the little documentary. Uh, I did a collaboration with someone that I consider one of the most creative um, musicians in electronica. He and she, what she does is more like Afro electronica. Her name is Val Janty. She lives in New York. She's from Haiti, and it's interesting because when you go into the world of electronic and electronica, most most of it deals as it is we deal with industrial sounds, these type of things. She's different because she brings into her sonic landscapes the cosmogony, the drums, the musical traditions of Haiti to create something that is very different to what you think about when you think about electronica. So this is and I'll give and I'll play you. I'll try to play you to introduce you a little bit a video of her. As I said, her name is Val Janty, so that you have an idea of what is that she brings to the project. And she, in this case, oh, let's do this. In this case, she was responsible for bringing in all of this other dimension in electronic to the project. So this is Rajan T. So I want you to hear her first alone, and then some of the end results of the collaboration. If you go to a performance of Valjanti, you would see her performing, like playing drums on pads, on electronic pads at the time. And it's just incredible. So she lives in New York. Whenever you have a chance, just go check her out because she's like, what she does is really, really unique. So I want to, against my passion and will, I'll stop it to then get you to hear then, some of the stuff that I did with her. In this case, I think you can, when you listen to this, you can, there's like three different layers that are registered in the recording. One is the, I would say, the one is the spiritual registration. Second one is the actual music, the music performance, and then is the symbolic registration. In this case, what you're gonna hear is like, it's called Reuniendo la Nación, which comes from one of the moments in the ceremony with the drums that you saw before, at the end of the ceremony, where you dance around the space carrying a flag, and it's more of a, I would say, of a representation of unity. It's a representation of, people that came from different places, representing their, the place that they're coming from. And this is called Reuniendo la Nación. Let me see if I can. Well, and what you're gonna hear is like, as you see the music material that I gave in this case is like Jason Moran playing the piano, the orchestral drums with Pedro Martinez, Roman Diaz, and Sandy Perez on drums. It's the Valjean T doing the soundscapes of the composition. And then we have very little information to create the whole composition. So the composition does not depend just on the information that we have, but as we were saying before, it's like using that as using improvisation as a vehicle to in the moment composition. So this is it. I want you to hear this then. If I could find it, I think so. Yeah, it's here. And I could do this. Go here. I don't know if you want to see. I will play you what, let me show. I think I'll do things differently. And I'll show you a little bit what the music material, the musical information in this case is. So this is it. This is the musical information. And then you will hear the music, and then you hear then all of these other layers that are built around that. So this is it, and this is it. Don't be shy if you have questions to ask. I want to play. Okay, well, let's do this. Yes. Again, against my will, we might have to stop it. Want to open it a little bit more for question in case that you have any of them before we continue. But that means like if there's no question, that means that people are having a good time.
Sorry, I have a question.
Go, Amanda.
I noticed that there was a lot more going on with the saxophone than there was on the page. Were there sections where you could improvise, or?
Yeah. Like I said, the little thing that I put you in there was just information. It was like the main information about the piece, but it's not just what makes the whole piece. It's just information. So we're taking that information and we're just like using to compose the whole thing, you know?
Okay, yeah, that makes
So
sense. Very
yes,
cool.
there's improvisation from the beginning. And this improvisation, we're using that material to create the entire composition. That's what it is.
Okay, nice.
At the beginning, I hesitated whether I would give you that information or not, because it could be confusing. So it's like, well, I'm reading something that is not what I'm listening to. But that's one of the different methods in which we can, or that I like to work. Yes. So to answer to your question, yes, we were like improvising, and we were just like, yeah, creating the piece in the moment.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Yep.
I guess there's a lot of people that have asked things in the chat that I'm not reading. Is there anything that I need to know?
Yeah, there's one question from Seamus just asking who the pianist was on that last track.
Oh, the pianist is Jason Moran. Is Jason Moran? Yes, the great and one and only Jason Moran, one of the creative forces in the contemporary music community. But also, I wanted to talk about my influences. So where are things coming from? We know a little bit about, or I share with you a little bit about, traditions that were just like next to me, that I grew up, that they were just like basically touching me since I got out of the womb. But also there are composers that to me have been really great they have influenced my work. I would say among them, many of the same composers that you know already, like Bela Bartok. And Bela Bartok is interesting because he also had um, for him also research was important. And we know about the huge research that he did with one of his best friends, Kodai, in which he went into the countryside to research the tradition from Hungary that was in the countryside, to then create one of the largest repositories of the music that was still in the countryside, which a lot of them have disappeared at the moment, but thanks to them, the recordings is there. So to me, this is something that it's really important. It's like every year I feel the need to go into the countryside, get together with the elder, record them, and learn from them, so that then I can bring back this information and figure out ways to compose with it, basically. Other composer, but I can say besides Bartok, I can say Ravel. Ravel, his orchestration vision is completely incredible. I would say also Debussy. I would say Gismonti. I would say Hermeto Pascual. Those the last two are from Brazil. I would say also Thelonious Monk, but I would say Berio. I would say also. I mean, the list is huge, because once you like music, I mean, influence can come from anywhere. And rather than trying to imitate their creative process, I try to learn the principle behind their compositions, and then use some of those principles, and even I take those principles and set them apart and see what I can do, um, what I can come up with different ideas and different materials to work with. Basically, that's how I like to think about it. I don't like, it's not my interest just to imitate, because by imitating we don't get, first of all, we will, as I learned from since I was little, we will never be them, and also at the same time we will be missing time in working in our own sound and our own voice, and our own material. Basically, that's how I look at it. Ligeti is another one that I really like. It's just, there's just like so many composers, Dutilleux, but also, yeah, so many composers. I would say, I like to, if we have more time, of course, just to play you some more stuff before we open it up to composer. And in this case, I want to play you a video so that you can see then, well, two things. One, a composition that is called Tarde en la Lisa, which again, what I did, it was like take inspiration for the characters. La Lisa is a neighborhood where I used to live in Havana when we moved from Camagüey to Havana. And this was a place with so many unique characters. So the composition is just, it tries to recreate, inspired on those people. So is there a question in the chat that I'm missing?
Nope, I think you're all good.
Okay. Okay, good. So this is it. Let me see. Guys, don't be shy. If we're shy, the world could be different. Okay, right here. I think so. Good. And this is Tarde en la Lisa. Okay, good. Here we go. We do this, and then as we have been doing, we do this. And again, this is another composition with the trio. That's more of cello solo, but as I said, against my will, it's really painful. I won't uh, hide it. Uh, if and then, as I said before, this is another one that I want to play to you before we open it up for question. I know that there's way more that I would like to discuss, but it's a matter of how can I say? It's a matter of having the spot just to sit down with a glass of wine or an orange juice, just to discuss and talk about music. Something I could do, spend all day doing this, of course. So this is another thing that I wanted to show to you, and this more related with the this other musical tradition that we discussed a little bit before. This is it. Don't be shy if you have any question, since this is not going to help me. This is it. This is like a project called Neutron King, in which there was a dance we used to dance that summons the movement and also the theater and dance involved within the Arara tradition that came all the way from Benin, specifically from the Sabalu region.
Aso ano lingwedo aso ingeli wedo ayana yana yana ayana lingwedo so ye lingwedo ayana yana yana ayana lingwedo aso ingeli wedo ayana yana yana ayana lingwedo so ye lingwedo ayana yana yana ayana lingwedo.
So the drums are the same one that you saw at the beginning in the little documentary, but now they're just like using in the whole different context. The dancer is dancing for a deity named Asohano, which it's one of the strongest healer that represents. Also, is the one that cures and works sick with chicken pox, and with the instrument that he has in his hand, he's able to clean himself and clean the community as well. I will go. I'm moving forward so that you can see more interaction with the dancer and the way that he interact with the band. I think it's coming. Bola. Against my will again. I might have to. ¿Qué pasó aquí? Okay, finally. Oh wow, I was missing you guys. There is more that I can talk and also like play you different type of projects. But I wanted to talk some of the projects that I'm currently working on. I'm working on a sound cycle. On a sound cycle that will be inspired in songs and poems composed by poets from the African diaspora, which is a project that I will premiere now in during the fall with the singer mezzo soprano Alicia Moran, and this will be also with the trio that you saw before, piano, saxophone, cello, and I will add a synthesizer. I wanted to have a choir, but they told me, Yosvany, for the purpose of production simplicity, the choir will be added later. So I'm working on that. I'm working also, as I said, I'm using these poems written by the poet from the diaspora, and then recomposing them into songs, so turning them into songs. And then I'm also working on an opera named Aponte, which is, I would say, this is like in the beginning stages, and it's just Aponte is one of the most important figures during the colonial time in Cuba, and he was the first one that organized. Well, he's the one that organized the first rebellion against the Spanish colonial system, inspired by the Haitian Revolution at the time. The rebellion was, discovered, and then all of the important organizers were executed, and their heads severed and hung in some of the important places in Havana to discourage slaves at the time to fight for independence. So that's the opera that I'm working on. Plus, I'm writing an orchestral piece that I started while I was this summer while I was in Italy in a composition residency at Civitella. That's going to be for full orchestra, and also trying to get into this electronic project that I'm working on. So, but for that one, I mean, that one is it's. I think I need to learn and find people that I would say that 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 work more on electronics from within the lab, that they know how to work with that, which is something that I must admit that I have to learn, but I cannot just become a specialist in electronic, where I'm a composer, a saxophone player, and a performer. So I have to collaborate with someone. But having said that, I would like to open it for questions. I know that there might be some questions in case that you have questions about areas that I wasn't able to touch in this short presentation. So I'm more than happy to answer questions. And thank you very much.
Thanks so much. A few of us had a question back during the last sax, cello, piano piece that you showed.
Yes.
There was a moment when, here, I'll turn on my video. There was a moment when the sax and cello were in unison, and it sounded like someone was also singing in unison with them. Was that just a psychoacoustic effect, or was like the pianist or the cellist also singing along?
That's the ghost voice of Yosvany Terry that I overdubbed that in the recording studio.
Nice.
So
Love it.
That was me.
It just sort of comes out of there and you don't notice it at first, and then it's like, oh, what's that?
It's a really nice addition, though.
But when we're doing live performance, the cellist, Eve Darenrach, is the one that sings.
Wow, wonderful.
But I took that part for the recording. I said, let me just sing myself, but he sings it, so it's like we're able to create that. What I like from the trio also is that it's an instrumentation that has a lot of potential to be expanded. I add percussion at some point. The piano play percussions on the piano too. We sing in some of the other pieces, and there are other pieces. We're planning to include electronic in the trio, and it's been held by the pianist Orlando that hasn't been able to learn Ableton Live, and just so that we can bring a new layer and another dimension to the music that we do. We're also like performing more new music repertoire too, that speaks more about the sound that you can hear in the new music scene in New York too. We have pieces by Gatonska, a great composer, and other composers. We try to perform music by composers that are living composers, and they come from different backgrounds, so that since it's a very unusual instrumentation that there is no repertoire written for it, we have to create it. And I think the best way is just to ask friends and composers to write for the trio. So you're all invited to write for the trio. If you feel in your spare time you think, oh, there's a trio that I heard that Yosvany plays in it, just don't think it twice. Just give me a call and say, Yosvany, I have this piece that it would be nice. Or we need to figure it out how to make it possible. That's the idea. Yes. Amanda, you have a question? You raise your hands? No? Okay, good. More questions? I haven't even checked the chat.
Do you publish the pieces that you write for the trio?
They are, that's a good question. They're registered with ASCAP. They haven't published them yet. So I need to get a publishing company just to publish all the material as a book, as pieces like that.
Follow-up question: could the saxophone part be played on oboe?
Yes.
Or clarinet?
Yeah. In fact, we played. What's his name, Yosvany? There's Le Fleur, a composer that he has a trio for oboe, piano, and viola, the gamba, that
I feel like there's like a Krugard or something, or there's another one. Anyway,
no, yeah. So it's a piece of, so it's basically, I just take the oboe part and play it in the soprano saxophone, because the register is very, very similar.
Yeah.
And
the sound is sort of similar too.
It's very similar, and especially with this soprano, it's a black soprano. It's black because it has a double lacquer, so the sound is really dark, which is what I like, and sounds a lot like wood. So therefore, is very, very into that area. Yeah, I was before called for something that you would kill me for if I say this, for places that record some like melodies for oboe in which there was no oboe around, but I would just bring the soprano and play that. Of course, you don't want to hear that. It's like, Shoshana, it's like, Yosvany, why didn't you call me?
Now you know.
Okay. Okay. Eric, you had a question.
Yeah. Thank you for your talk. It's been really nice.
My pleasure.
You mentioned composers that influenced you. I was curious if there are any Cuban composers.
Oh, yes.
The tradition.
Yes. Cuban composer I can name Caturla.
Yeah, Caturla.
I can name also
like Roldan or something.
Who?
Amadeo Roldan.
Roldan, but I can name Lecuona, and Lecuona especially his danzas afro-cubanas for piano, which are like, they're like really great pieces for piano, because it's like he basically created a language for the piano, continuing the tradition of the contradanza, but a language that didn't exist, in which he started incorporating all of these information coming from the several Afro-Cuban musical traditions. So it's like, when you hear that, it's just like, wow. Leo Brower too, who I believe created this universe for guitar that didn't exist before. So guitar is like before and after Leo Brower. His sonic world is just so incredible, And I've met him, and he's just really such a giant as a composer, and very inspiring once you talk to him. Someone that is very open and can push you to explore things that you never thought about. I like also Gonzalo Rubalcaba, who as a composer is someone very personal and unique, and has also has a composer education too. So he has is a composer by training too. Certainly, and then, but there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that I like, and that I believe that they have influenced me from Cuba. Definitely.
Thank you.
Of course. Is there? I'm sorry that I haven't been looking at the chat. Might be some questions that I'm missing.
I think we're caught up in the chat. Does anybody else have any other questions? Or if I missed your question in the chat, please shout out.
Okay.
I'm curious, Yosvany. The Bohemian Trio, how did you all form? How did you all meet each other?
The Bohemian Trio, that's a good question. I went to school with Orlando Alonso, the pianist, when in Havana, Cuba. We were really good friends, and then we found each other here. He went to both Juilliard and then did his master at MSN, Manhattan School of Music, with I'm forgetting his piano teacher, but it's who's also from Cuba. But one of the great talents from this country. And Orlando also is a conductor. He just used to have his orchestra, and then we're good friends, and we were trying to find ways to communicate since we were orbiting in different worlds. I was um, I was more part of the jazz and contemporary music world, and he was more jazz, and he was more within the classical music world. And we, at that time, I was also going through a lot of courses of composition, orchestration, conducting, and things like that at Manes. So we said, why don't we create an ensemble in which we can collaborate and you know and find ways. And one of the things that I told him, well, I don't want to create a quartet. I'd say, it would be nice to create an ensemble in which we don't have to use percussion. Of course, I love percussion and a percussion player myself, but I wanted to have the challenge of having the musicians to be the percussion players, the silent percussion player, or the invisible percussion player, I would say. So and also to put together an ensemble that was small in size that we could put in a cab, so that we could all take a cab ride if we have to go to a festival or whatever, So that's why it's a trio. We toy around with the quartet and say, no, let's keep it in a trio. We fill in a cab, we can go to the airport, we can do this and that. And then by being a trio, it would be more of a challenge because we have to make it sound like an orchestra at times, and we can also create this like really intimate sound in which we can play a unison, the three of us, and become just like one person. So that's how it came about. And then the first time that we play as the trio was in the Composers Now Festival in New York, that is organized by one of our leading composers, Tania Leon. And Tania, head of the trio, and she invited us to perform. So that was like how we broke the ice. It was like, boom, we Composers Now Festival at a Symphony Space in New York. So I had to go back to Cuba, write all the repertoire, and then come back and present the trio there. And then since then, we started just like, building up repertoire, talking to our friends composer, and then started playing we started getting more and more within the circuit of chamber music. So we performed at a Spoleto Festival in Charleston. At South Carolina, we'd also perform at the Lincoln Center Festival, the Classical Music Festival, but we also did Maine, and also we have done tours in the country. So and to me it was important because I said, okay, say how to make sense of like more than 20 years studying classical music, and not just studying, but it's like, yes, I keep studying classical music, every day, and just like, going through score, learning this, blah, 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 and trying to learn. So it's like, as I said, my love for music is not just for one type of music or genre, but it's just music in general. So uh, uh, is that it's like trying to make sense of like what to do when you have a wild taste.
That's great. Thank you.
Mhm. For sure, for sure, for sure. Do we have any other questions?
Do the other people in the trio also compose for the trio, or is it mostly just you and other composers?
No, well, I have written the most for the trio. The cellist, our cellist, Eve, had been threatening to write something for the trio, but he has not done yet. So it's like I'm always telling him, so when is the piece coming? But no, so far it's been me. Yeah, yeah.
Forgive me if I missed this. How long has your trio been active?
Oh, I think it has to be at least we have a CD out that is called Okonkolo. Uh, uh, that was put out by I tell you right now, was put out by Innova Music. Innova is this great uh, label, but it's also like a musician association. It's like so many things in itself. But I believe, I don't know. What year are we? This is 2021. Uh, at least 8 years, I think.
Okay,
Eight or yeah, 7 or 8 years.
nice.
I think so. I think so. And yeah, I think so. I need to make that. That's a good point. I don't even know the answer for that. I need to get my numbers straight. Definitely. Dionisio, is Dionisio with us still? I don't think so. Or maybe he's away. But anyway, guys, and if you have any questions, just go ahead and we'll talk. Or else, as I promised before, I'm planning to send a lot of music to Peter so that he can share it with all of you that participated. Dionisio, you're here back with us.
Yes. Oh, I was on mute.
Ah, okay.
I was just listening. I was working on something.
All right. Do you have a burning question over there?
No, not really. I mean, it certainly has prompted me to do a little bit more research because, well, living in Mexico and not knowing all of the influences that, well, yeah, just impact the music. I think I'm a little bit ignorant in that aspect, and so I think that's my main takeaway from this.
Ah, okay, okay, okay. Hey, it's never late, I would say. It's always good. It happened to all of us. I go listen to someone, it's like, why I never thought about it. Now I have to research this and start learning about it. So like I'm trying to learn now about electronics and see how I can incorporate it into my music, but in a natural way. And then especially, I mean, coming back from Europe, this time I learned about this um, institution named IRCAM, which I never heard of. And they have so much in there. And then I met this other composer there. Her name is Sivan Eldar, a great, beautiful composer. She did her PhD at UC Berkeley. And she's the one that just telling me about because she's been collaborating with them. So I was like, oh, wow. So that's an incredible thing that I'm trying to figure out how. First of all, if we have something similar to that in this side of the Atlantic, and then who will be the best people to collaborate to to start looking more seriously, uh, not because I'm not interested to create a tape to perform with it, but also to find ways to naturally incorporate electronics in the music, basically.
Well, I would say, and perhaps this is a little bit of a important observation, but like folkloric, I'm more familiar with like cumbia, specifically from Colombia,
Mm-hmm.
because of certain cultural exchange that happened in the 80s, and now cumbia is a staple of the music of my city.
Definitely.
So I've gotten to see how cumbia has evolved, which is it has similar like beginnings to like rumba and all these genres of dance music in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And they, especially from the 80s and onwards, they have had a very interesting integration of electronics and their folk music. And I think especially Colombia, Argentina, and Peru are excellent examples of how to do this, how folk music is modernized. Or not modernized, just experimenting with texture, especially in a field that is so wide and basically infinite as electronic music.
Mm, yeah, it's interesting. I've heard a lot of those projects, and they're really interesting. Um, they're really interesting. Now, what I'm trying to imagine, okay, let me put it this way to you. Let me see if it's a, I don't know if you've heard some of the electronic things. Uh, how can I put it? That people like composers like either or burial or some of the composers that you see what they do. So my idea is to figure it out a way in which I have access to sound waves to manipulate that. It's like how can you manipulate sound wave? How can you manipulate sounds that you already record or sample and having all at your disposal and then compose with that. So uh, I know that this is not reinventing the wheel, but it's something that I want to use, incorporating then, of course, then all the information that I have like about cosmogony, symbolism, uh, spirituality, and melody and rhythmic orientation. So it's like putting all that together and then creating these other compositions. So that's what I know that is, I have a little way to go to accomplish that, but that's where I'm trying to go, Dionisio.
Oh yeah, I see. Well, not that you put it that way. Yeah, I think it's a little bit more difficult than what I was saying.
Yeah, it's different because I know some of the group that you mentioned, which they're doing an incredible job, and I've listened to them, but I'm trying to get into. I need
Into
to
my
find another
experiment.
planet. I know that there's more planets that they haven't declared yet, but I'm trying to find one of those planets, basically,
Mm.
and see what the music for those planets would sound like.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting like thing because just like just placing folk music or like folk informed music rather into a more experimental context is always like very jarring, especially if you are very familiar, or have internalized that music as part of your culture, because you tend to see it like almost offensive when you yourself are experimenting with that music, because like this is not what I am. Why am I changing this and that? But mm, I think one has to come to terms with the when experimenting with this stuff. I think I find myself like guessing a lot of decisions because I feel or like I think that it's not true to the music I'm exploring.
Mhm.
So I think that a lot of that mindset is something to overcome, or trying to marry it with the idea of experimentation.
Yeah,
I hate
yeah.
to interrupt this conversation, and we can definitely keep this going. I do want to just take us down off of YouTube before we let this run on. But Yosvany, thank you so much for being here, and feel free to stick around and continue this conversation with Dionisio once we're off
Okay.
YouTube.
Thanks a lot once again, as I said, to you and everybody that participated, and also to the zFestival. We have to promote the festival and make it really visible for the entire world, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have you back again soon and get some more
Anytime.
music.
Anytime. Yeah.